Today, we're trying to get our heads around Somalia's political scene. It's incredibly complex, always feels like this high-stakes tug-of-war going on. The sources you've given us paint a picture of, well, high hopes for democracy, constantly clashing with deep institutional conflict.
That's right. And that conflict, specifically between the federal government, the FGS, and the federal member states, the FMS, that's our focus. Our mission, really, is to unpack what's driving this tension. We'll look at the constitutional history, sure, but the real key, the inescapable factor shaping all of this, is clan dynamics.
You mean the rivalry between the big clan families?
Especially the Hawaii and the Darude. This isn't just background noise, it's arguably the central engine driving these federal-state conflicts again and again across different administrations. It explains why the system seems almost designed for infighting.
And that leads us straight to this core contradiction we found, right?
Yeah.
Officially, Somalia wants to be, a modern, unified state, no political tribes. But the reality,
Yeah. The reality is that power, day to day, even legally now in some ways, is carved up using this rigid clan formula, the 4.5 system.
so the official documents aim for one thing.
While the actual mechanics of power operate on a totally different, almost opposite principle. And that fundamental tension, that gap between the ideal and the real, keeps the political situation incredibly volatile.
Okay, let's start with that ideal then. The 1960 Constitution, that was the vision at independence, wasn't it?
Absolutely. It lays it out clearly.
Yeah.
Somalia, as an independent and fully sovereign state, a unitary republic, the people are one and indivisible.
And they were serious about sidelining clan identity in politics.
Very serious. Article 12 explicitly banned political parties based on tribal denomination. The idea was nation building, citizenship over lineage. A clean break, or so they hoped.
But that's not the Somalia we see today. Decades of conflict changed things.
Completely. State collapse, civil war. Eventually, a federal system emerged as a pragmatic way forward. But to make federalism work, they had to bring back the very thing the 1960 Constitution tried to abolish, explicit clan power sharing.
Which brings us to the 4.5 formula. It sounds almost like code.
It kind of is. Since around 2000, it's been the unwritten rule, the way to divide up parliament seats, cabinet posts, everything. You have the four major clan families, Darude, Dir, Digil, and Marifal, and Hawaii getting equal shares, plus a half share, the 0.5, for smaller minority groups.
A practical tool for peace building, maybe. Making sure everyone felt included after the conflict.
That was the logic, yes. Stability through inclusion. But the really fascinating twist, the one that highlights that contradiction you mentioned, came when they tried to move towards proper democracy.
Towards one person, one vote, OPOV.
Exactly. The sources show that the attempt to get closer to OPOV actually ended up cementing the clan system into law.
Wait, how does that work? Trying for democracy makes the clan system more official.
It sounds backwards, I know. But look, the political leaders realized full OPOV wasn't feasible immediately. So the electoral law passed for the 2020 cycle had this crucial phrase, something like, until a national census is done, elections will happen where possible while maintaining the power sharing the Somalis have agreed upon.
Maintaining the power sharing. So the 4.5 formula.
Precisely. That clause basically took the unwritten 4.5 rule and, for the first time, put it formally into the legal framework for that election. It became binding.
Wow. So the Democratic step forward inadvertently locked in the clan structure, like trying to renovate and accidentally pouring concrete over the old foundations.
That's a pretty good analogy, actually. And the result is that each seat in the lower house, all 275 of them, is now seen functionally as the property of the specific subclan that holds it. It's not about the individual MP, it's about the clan's share.
Which inevitably drags us back to the rivalry you mentioned earlier, the Hawaii and Darude fighting over these shares.
That's the core dynamic. This structure becomes the battlefield for that intense, often zero-sum competition between these two dominant clan families. It fuels the FGS-FMS conflict because control of the federal government itself becomes a prize in this rivalry.
And you can see this pattern in who holds the presidency, right? It swings back and forth.
Clearly, look at the last decade or so. You had Sheikh Sharif Ahmed Hawaii, then Hassan Sheikh Mohammed, also Hawaii from the Abgal subclan.
Yeah.
Then the 2017 election was a big shift. Mohammed Abdullahi Mohammed, known as Farmajo, came in. He's Darude from the Merhan subclan. That was the first Darude president in quite a while.
So when Farmajo was in power, the federal government was largely seen through that Darude lens. And then when he ran against Hassan Sheikh Mohammed, Ahaway, again, it wasn't just politics.
It was about which major clan coalition would control the center,
Hmm.
control the resources, the institutions, the narrative. These elections become proxy battles for that fundamental clan power struggle.
And where does this rivalry flare up most obviously in terms of institutions?
The status of Mogadishu, the capital city, the Benadir region. This isn't just an administrative issue, it's a massive power play, directly linked to the Hawaii-Darude balance.
Because Mogadishu is the seat of government, the economic hub, but it's not technically a federal member state like, say, Puntland or Jubaland.
Exactly. And there's a big push, mainly from Hawaii interests, given their strong demographic presence in the city, to grant Mogadishu FMS status.
Which would give them more formal power at the federal level.
Significantly more. It would shift the whole balance in the federal system. And to counter that potential shift, the capital is actually systematically kept underrepresented.
Underrepresented how? What does that look like?
Well, the provisional constitution says all the old pre-war regions should get equal representation in the Senate, the upper house. But Benadir, Mogadishu, it currently holds 0 seats.
0. The capital city has no senators.
None. Out of 54 seats in the upper house, Benadir gets 0. It's a structural block, a deliberate move, you could argue, to limit Hawiye influence at that federal legislative level and maintain leverage for rival blocs, primarily Darude-aligned interests.
That seems almost engineered to prevent consensus, doesn't it? And this whole high-stakes, contested environment, sources say it runs on, well, a lot of money.
Oh, absolutely. It fuels a political marketplace, not really a democratic contest. The sources are pretty stark about presidential elections involving manipulation, patronage, votes being bought and sold.
Any specific numbers that jump out to give a sense of the scale?
The figures from the 2016 cycle are pretty eye-watering. Secure a single seat in parliament could reportedly cost up to $1 million US.
$1 million for one MP seat.
Yes. And the estimated price for an MP's vote, just for the presidential election itself, was maybe around $50,000 on the night. Think about that investment. It tells you this isn't about policy platforms. It's about securing power through finance.
It fundamentally changes who can even participate, let alone govern.
Okay, so moving from that elite selection process, how does this core Hawaii-Darude rivalry play out institutionally in the day-to-day FGS versus FMS fights, especially around elections?
Well, that's where the rubber really meets the road. Every time the central government tries to assert national authority, say through the National Independent Electoral Commission, the NIC.
The body meant to run elections nationally.
Right. FMS leaders, particularly if they're aligned with the clan family currently out of power at the center, often see these federal bodies as hostile, as threats to their regional autonomy, which they fiercely guard.
And we saw that directly, didn't we, with Puntland and Jubaland just rejecting the federal election plans.
We did. They didn't just disagree. They publicly announced they wouldn't implement the federal electoral law. And then they took the pretty drastic step of actually closing down the NIC offices in their states.
So the federal election body literally couldn't operate there. Correct. They insisted their own state-level bodies should run elections locally. It completely fragments the national process. It's FMS leaders using their devolved power to directly undermine the national system, especially when they perceive the FGS as being controlled by the other side in that core clan rivalry.
And the sources mention this split authority. You have the formal laws being debated in Parliament in the Mogadishu.
And then you have these parallel extra-constitutional talks happening between the FGS president and the FMS leaders. This body, often called the National Consultative Council, or NCC.
Which isn't really in the Constitution, is it?
Not formally in that way, but it's where the real deals get cut because the FMS leaders hold serious cards, especially when it comes to electing the Senate, the upper house.
How so?
Because the system requires the FMS presidents to nominate the candidates for the Senate seats allocated to their state. Then the state legislature votes on those nominees. So the FMS presidents basically handpick their state's senators.
Meaning they can ensure loyalty? Senators who will defend the FMS position back in Mogadishu.
Absolutely. It guarantees regional power brokers have direct influence in the federal legislature, which is good for decentralization in theory, but it also guarantees conflict whenever FGS and FMS interests diverge, which, given the underlying clan dynamics, is often.
So, if the whole setup seems almost designed for conflict between the center and the regions, driven by this deeper rivalry, what's stopping Somalia from breaking this cycle? Are the fundamental building blocks missing?
That's a very good way to put it. The sources really emphasize the lack of critical legal infrastructure. You can't have a functioning multi-party democracy, what the sources call a distant dream, without the basic laws in place.
Like what kind of laws?
Foundational stuff. Finalized laws on who is a citizen, laws against corruption, rules about how political campaigns are funded. These are still missing or incomplete. And the provisional constitution itself, still provisional, still unfinished business.
And without rules on campaign finance, for instance, that million-dollar a seat politics just continues unchecked.
It allows it to thrive. It ensures politics remains largely an elite game, accessible only to those with immense resources, often derived from or connected to control of state resources or external patronage.
And institutionally, is there supposed to be a mechanism to sort out these FGS, FMS disputes?
There is, on paper. The Provisional Constitution mandates an interstate commission. Its whole job is supposed to be resolving administrative, political, or jurisdictional disputes between the different levels of government. A referee, essentially.
Right.
But it hasn't been properly set up or empowered. It doesn't really function.
So when disagreements happen,
They don't get resolved through a predictable rules-based process. Instead, every major issue turns into a high-stakes political brawl, usually hashed out in those ad hoc NCC meetings between the top leaders, driven by their respective clan bloc interests. The lack of that neutral commission guarantees politics stays personalized and conflict-prone.
okay, so pulling this all together for you, the listener, the political instability we keep seeing in Somalia isn't random. It seems to be a direct result of this incredibly difficult shift from a predictable, if undemocratic, clan-based system, the 4.5, toward genuine representative democracy.
And that difficulty is massively amplified by these deep-seated rivalries, particularly between Harai and Darude elites, fighting what amounts to a zero-sum game for control over the federal government and its resources. This dynamic plays out administration after administration.
Somalia is trying to build a modern state on foundations of powerful traditional clan loyalties that are now embedded, even legally, into the system.
That's the heart of it. And maybe a final thought for you to chew on. Looking ahead, stability isn't just about who gets which political seat. It's also fundamentally about economics.
You mean who controls the country's wealth? Natural resources.
Exactly. The Provisional Constitution is very clear on this, too. It says the allocation of the natural resources shall be negotiated by and agreed upon by the federal government and the federal member states. Oil, gas, minerals, fisheries.
That negotiation hasn't really happened yet, has it?
Not in any comprehensive way. Until there's a lasting agreement on how to share that potential national wealth, alongside resolving the final status of Mogadishu Benadir, achieving a stable political consensus is going to be incredibly difficult. You can't agree on the political structure if you haven't agreed on who benefits from the economic pie. That's perhaps the next major hurdle.
A crucial piece of the puzzle. Well, thank you for walking us through that intricate picture. It really highlights the deep structural challenges. For everyone listening, you can find links to some of the key documents we touched on in the show notes. We'll catch you on the next Deep Dive.